Story 1. It was a cold October night as I drove down the nearly empty backroads of rural Wisconsin. I had decided to take a detour on my drive back from visiting an old college friend in Minneapolis. I figured the country roads would be a nice peaceful drive compared to the busy interstate highways. As I drove past bare cornfields and dark forests, I felt utterly alone. I hadn't passed another car for miles. The radio was nothing but static now. My old Camry's headlights cut a feeble path through the inky darkness. I glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. A feeling of unease started to creep up my spine. Maybe this drive wasn't such a good idea after all. The isolation out here was starting to spook me. Just then, the engine let out a loud bang, and the car jerked violently. Thick smoke poured from under the hood. Damn it. I cried as I steered the sputtering car onto the gravel shoulder. The engine made a few desperate wheezes before falling silent. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, trying to collect my thoughts. My heart was pounding. I was completely stranded alone on this desolate backroad in the middle of the night. Hands shaking, I pulled out my smartphone to call for help. But there was no signal. "You've got to be kidding me," I groaned. As I sat there, the headlights started to dim. I turned them off to conserve battery. I didn't want to be left in total darkness. The car was already enveloped in inky blackness like a tomb. My breath quickened as panic set in. I rummaged through the glove box for a flashlight. "Please let there be batteries," I prayed. I flicked it on and a sigh of relief escaped me as a flashlight cut through the dark. Outside all was still and quiet. Then I heard it. Footsteps crunching on the gravel, steadily approaching. I froze, listening intently. The deliberate footsteps grew louder, closer. Too close to be an animal. My pulse pounded in my ears. Every horror movie I had ever seen flashed before my eyes. Stay calm, I told myself. Don't panic. Maybe it's just a farmer coming to help. But somehow I knew that wasn't true. I could feel evil approaching. Peering through the driver's side window, I pointed the flashlight into the darkness. Its dim beam fell upon a pale figure slowly emerging from the black forest lining the road. It was humanoid in shape, but not human. Too tall, too thin, its limbs bending unnaturally as it moved. I gasped and the flashlight slipped from my trembling hands. The thing's face was devoid of eyes or nose, just a cavernous maw of needle-like teeth. This was no farmer. This was a monster. I fumbled for the keys, desperate to get the car started. The thing was just outside now, scraping its long talons along the side of the car. Escape was impossible, but I had to try. I turned the key. The starter motor weakly clicked, but did not turn over. "Come on, please," I sobbed. I tried again. Click, click. Nothing. The pale creature was at my window now. Up close, its flesh was ragged and rotting. I cowered against the far door as the thing peered in. A long black tongue snaked out, licking the glass with a trail of foul slime. I screamed as it pressed its unspeakable face against the window. A clawed hand shot out, punching through the glass. Jagged shards rained over me as the creature began forcing its way inside. Fighting back hysteria, I kicked at the monster's hands which grasped for me. My kicks connected with cold writhing flesh, but did not stop its progress. With one final heave, the top half of the creature was inside the car. Scrabbling over the console, its claws shredding the seats inches from my face. My screams turned to choked gurgles as the thing wrapped its icy fingers around my throat, forcing me down. My hands beat frantically against its chest, but my strength was fading. As my vision darkened, I managed to grab a large shard of broken glass from the window. With my last ounce of strength, I slammed the makeshift blade into the creature's neck. It let out an unearthly shriek, releasing its hold on me for a moment. I stabbed again and again, until the thing recoiled out of the car, spewing foul ichor. Gasping for air, I leaped from the car and began sprinting down the road. I ran until my lungs burned, not daring to look back. The creature's wails eventually faded into the night. By some miracle, I came upon a farmhouse and collapsed against the door. A frightened elderly couple let me in and called the police. Though I was safe now, I knew the horror of this night would stay with me forever. I still had no explanation for what I had seen. All I could do was be grateful to be alive. Story 2. It was close to midnight as I left the hospital after a long shift as a nurse. Exhausted, I got in my car and headed for home. The roads were empty at this late hour as I drove through the sleepy town of Ashcroft. I lived about 15 minutes outside of town in a modest little house. As I turned onto the county highway leading out of Ashcroft, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it at first, just another late-night driver. But over the next few miles, I realized the car was matching my speed, say a consistent distance behind me. I sped up a little, and the car sped up as well, pacing me. Unease prickled at the back of my neck. I took a left onto a winding back road I sometimes used as shortcut to my house. The car followed. Oh, just a coincidence, I told myself. But my palms were starting to sweat against the steering wheel. Over the next several miles, I took random turns down country lanes, speeding up, slowing down. But no matter what I did, those headlights loomed in my mirror, pursuing me relentlessly. Panic rising, I pulled out my cell phone to call the police. No signal. I was completely alone on these dark country roads. The isolation that I normally found peaceful now felt menacing. My gas light flickered on. I wouldn't make it all the way home. The nearest town was still 5 miles away. I pushed the gas pedal down further, tires spinning on loose gravel as I took a sharp curve. Finally, the lights of Danvers appeared ahead. I blew through a stop sign in my haste, heading for the all-night gas station on the edge of town. Please let someone else be there. I pulled into the station and leaped from the car, not even bothering to turn off the engine. The pursuing vehicle pulled in right behind me, its headlights blinding. I shielded my eyes, heart pounding. A car door opened and slammed shut. Footsteps approached me, but I could not see who it was against the glare. A tall figure came into view, face obscured by a baseball hat. He was carrying something in his hand. My blood ran cold. Was that a knife? I let out a scream and sprinted for the station door, bursting inside, screaming for help. But the place was empty, just a bored cashier reading a magazine. I ran to him, babbling about the man chasing me, begging him to call 911. He looked confused but picked up the phone behind the counter. As he spoke to the emergency dispatcher, I peered out the window. The mysterious car was gone. The parking lot was empty. Maybe I had imagined it after all. The cashier said no one was out there. Just to be safe, he told me to wait while the police came. As we waited, he poured me a cup of coffee, eyeing me with concern. After what felt like an eternity, red and blue lights flashed into the parking lot. 2 officers entered the station, looking puzzled. They took my statement and went to search the lot, but found nothing amiss. No sign of any stalker. They offered to escort me home. I gratefully accepted, following close behind their cruiser. But the whole way there, my eyes darted around searching the darkness for any sign of those haunting headlights. At last we pulled up my long dirt driveway, the welcoming glow of home in sight. After profusely thanking the officers, I ran inside, locking the door and sinking to the floor in relief. I was safe. But I knew I wouldn't sleep that night. I peered nervously out the window into the darkness, and that's when I saw it. A lone pair of headlights at the end of my drive. Watching. Waiting. I jumped back from the window, heart in my throat. This was no illusion. Someone had followed me all the way here. I ran to check the other doors and windows, all secure. I pulled the curtains shut and turned off all the lights. No way was I going out there alone. I had to wait for morning. Huddled on the couch, I watched the headlights through a crack in the curtains. They never moved, keeping a silent vigil outside my house all night long. I didn't understand what this person wanted from me. As sunlight finally started filtering in, the headlights switched off. I'd heard an engine start and fade into the distance. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. But I knew my tormentor would probably be back tonight. I made plans to stay at a friend's house in town. until the police caught whoever was behind this. Because I had a terrible feeling that if I stayed out here all alone another night, I might never be seen again. Story 3. It was well past midnight when I pulled into the deserted gas station. I had been driving for hours through the desolate backroads of rural Nevada, heading home to California from a weekend trip. I hadn't seen another car for over an hour when my gas light tinged on. Luckily, I spotted a dingy gas station up ahead, the only sign of life so far. The place looked ancient, something out of the 1960s. Only one of the overhead lights worked, flickering eerily. The parking lot was empty except for an old pickup truck parked near the garage. I was uneasy as I pulled up to the pump, but I didn't have much choice. I needed gas to make it the rest of the way home. I got out and stuck my card in the pump, hoping it still worked at this outdated place. As the gas flowed, I glanced toward the station shop. Behind the dirty glass door, I could see the dark silhouette of a man standing utterly still watching me. Something about his motionless stance unsettled me. I gave an awkward wave, but he did not react at all. I turned my back to him and kept pumping gas, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. The whole place gave me the creeps. I hadn't seen a living soul for miles, and now this guy was just staring. It was beyond strange. As the click of the pump indicated my tank was full, I heard a noise that turned my blood to ice, the unmistakable creak of my backseat car door opening. There was someone or something in my car. I spun around quickly, expecting to see a menacing figure emerging from the backseat. But there was nothing, just darkness inside the car. The door stood fully open, but there was no one around. My hands shook and I dropped the gas nozzle, splashing fuel onto my shoes. I leaped into the driver's seat, slamming and locking all the doors. I gunned the engine and peeled out of there like a bat out of hell, leaving the mysterious open door and the creepy attendant behind. It wasn't until I was a few miles down the road that I regained my composure. What the hell had just happened? Maybe the wind had blown open the door, but there was no wind tonight. And that still didn't explain the eerie attendant just watching and not reacting. A queasy feeling settled in my gut as I drove. I decided to pull over and check the backseat, just to put myself at ease. I stopped on the shoulder, flipped on the overhead light, and turned around slowly, expecting to see nothing unusual. My heart seized in my chest. There, on the grey fabric, was a dark stain. Unmistakably a wet blood stain, fresh by the looks of it. Drops of blood trailed over the seat and onto the floor. There was even some smeared on the inside of the still open door. But the back seat was completely empty, not a soul in sight. No murder victim or psycho killer waiting to attack me, just this inexplicable blood. Hands trembling, I jumped out to get a better look, wondering what the hell could have caused this. It looked like something, or someone, badly injured had been in my back seat without me noticing. By then, I was crying and freaking out. I couldn't drive on alone through the night with this horrifying mystery. I decided to turn around and go back to beg for help from the creepy gas station attendant. Police, ambulance, anyone. When I arrived 15 minutes later, the place was dark and shuttered. A handwritten sign on the door indicated they were closed. It wasn't even an hour since I'd been there. How could they have closed so soon? Through the window, the shelves looked ransacked, some knocked over entirely. Airy, there was no sign of the attendant. My uneasiness became outright dread. Screw this, I thought, I'm getting back on the main highway. I drove away, hoping I could flag down a good Samaritan to help. The dark, endless highway stretched on ahead. In the rearview mirror, I could see the blood drying on my backseat. No matter how far I drove, the night's horrors would remain.